Solar Punks, and welcome to Solarpunk Futures. I'm Brianna Castagnozzi, co-editor-in-chief of Solarpunk magazine. I'm here today with Jetse de Vries to talk about optimistic science fiction. Jetse, would you like to say hello?
Hello, I'm Jetse de Vries. I used to be part of the Interzone magazine back in the days before I edited an optimistic sci-fi anthology called Shine. I think we'll talk about that.
Awesome. Yeah, without further ado, let me ask you about Shine Anthology. What would you like to say about that?
Well, thing is, when I was part of the Interzone editorial team from 2004 to 2008, what I saw was that most of the stories that we, not only that we published, but also that we received in the slush pile, were predominantly pessimistic. Well, I thought this was not good. I thought we needed more balance. I actually wanted to both actively solicit and publish more upbeat science fiction stories, but my co-editors didn't agree with that. So in the end, I left Interzone and I launched this idea of starting an optimistic science fiction anthology, and I pitched that at the 2008 WorldCon in Denver to the editors of Solaris Books from the UK. This was actually a bit of a funny story because there was two people from them, George Mann and Mark Newton, were sitting in a table in the bar, and I knew they were from Solaris, so I approached them and I pitched my anthology, and they thought, yeah, this is great, this is fantastic, and I was really happy. And they said, yeah, but you have to pitch it to Christian Dunn, who was on the toilet, who was the actual editor. And I was like, So I had to do the whole thing again, but it worked out, and I sold the anthology to Solaris Books. Thing is, there was a problem because by the time I had opened up for submissions and selected all the stories. I also approached a lot of writers, of course. I did both soliciting and an open reading period. That Solaris Books was sold by the original editor's Black Library to another company, Rebellion. And during that time, that was almost 1.5 years, Shine just hang there in the balance because the old company didn't want to publish it and the new company wasn't ready to publish it. So I was hoping to release it in 2008, but eventually it got released in 2010. So there was a 2-year delay in it. But then eventually it was published. What I really try to do with Shine is not just because I felt that science fiction, I still feel that way, by the way, as an overabundance of downbeat, doom, gloom, and dystopian type of stories. And I wanted to do something to address that imbalance and publish an anthology with upbeat, forward-looking stories as a counterbalance. But also, what I also wanted to do while I was at it, I wanted to also achieve a reasonably good gender balance, and I also wanted to include stories from all over the world. So I had people, and then I was lucky to get people from stories from people in other continents, from South America and Asia and Europe, of course, and North America. I was only unhappy that I couldn't get anything from Africa, but oh well, I tried. So that was with Shine. But you also have to keep in mind that nowadays you can do what you from Solarpunk magazine do. You have Kickstarter where you can try to finance and promote an anthology. Kickstarter wasn't very big in those days. I think it wasn't even there back in 2008. So I had to pitch it to an existing publisher. And if you pitch an anthology to an actual publisher, what they really want is an anthology with big names. Like, hey, look at all these famous writers on the cover, because that helps. sell the anthology. And what I wanted is, I'm like, well, I don't care who writes it. I just want good stories. And I don't care if they're written by well-known authors or by new talents. I don't care. So I did solicit a lot of well-known writers that I had known through my time with Interzone, etc. But the response was very, was disappointing. Nobody, only Alistair Reynolds sent me something, and Al is an old friend, and the rest didn't really do much. So I had no other choice, which I didn't mind, but to publish most of talented authors, which is good, because in that what the authors that actually appeared in Shine. The big name was L. Reynolds and Kay Canyon for all that, but the people that were published in Shine, whose stories I took back in 2008, were people like Aliette de Bodard, Sylvia Moreno Garcia, which was her first pro sale, Gareth Powell, Madeline Ashby, Lavi Tidar, who all later became relatively to very well-known novelists, and people like Gord Scheller and Mary Ness, who haven't written any novels yet, but who I rate very high as story writers. So I did have the talent in there, and you can only point out 10 years later, you see, I helped discover those people. There was a question in there that asked about my favorite stories. What's all your favorite stories in Shine? It's a bit like asking a parent which child they love the most. It's hard, but I'll give it a try anyway. Of those stories in there, what I do is what a lot of anthologists do, is that you start and you end with what you think are the best stories. It works a bit like that. The first story, you really want to pull the people in, and with the last one, you want to leave them with a satisfied feeling. So that works. It's true. So the Earth of Yunye from Eric Gregory, which was set in China, was a good one to open the story. Which was also it was not only a relatively realistic story about how to clean up the future in China, where they are unfortunately now again burning tons of coal. And gave a bit of hope in there. And the story after that, the green man watches the black bar go up, and then you have a story set in Brazil. And what I like really is that I was able to get a very a range of stories that were all over the globe, that gave different viewpoints of different possibilities across the world, which I really liked. Another one I really liked was Twittering the Stars by Mary Ness, because Mary Ness sent me a story in that was nothing but one long range of tweets. And I'm like, that's crazy, but it worked. I'm like, hey, I got a story of nothing but tweets. I think a few months later, there was another story that consisted of nothing but tweets, but I think Mary's was the first one. I'm like, hey, I got it first, I'm happy. And the thing with Mary's story is that it works also backwards. If you read those stories from the end and you go back, the story also works. It's very, very smart. I was also happy with L. Reynolds at Budokan, because L knows me a bit, and he knows that I am quite a big hard rock heavy metal fan, so he put that influence in there. And by the way, the beautiful picture of Geddy Lee you got in your room. Love Rush. I love Rush. So I like L not only sent a nice story, but it was also a bit tailored at me, and I was really happy with that. Another one I was really happy with was Sergeant Rasmussen, a report by Organic from Gord Scheller, because that one actually approached the optimistic angle through the angle of how intergovernmental panels can change the world. And this is true. It is true that big, not just the European Union, but big intergovernmental companies can put up rules like the carbon offsetting and other stuff that can change the world. And I think that Sergeant Rasmussen in that regard actually foreshadowed a bit Kim Stanley Robertson's current novel, The Ministry for the Future, where indeed a big intergovernmental organization really tries to solve the climate problems that we are facing and which unfortunately will become worse. So I was like, hey, that's a good one. The other ones, the other stories approached it mostly from personal or from small companies angles, but to do it also from the political angle, I think was important. And I wish I had a few more like that. I also like Castle World from Kay Canyon, which was about a little island drifting in the Pacific that was slowly absorbing all the plastic, the big Pacific garbage batch, although in small bites, of course, and converting it to something normal, which I really liked. And of course, I liked Madeline Ashby's Aishin, which is it's subtle. The progress in there comes not from high tech or from great concepts, but from people that are in a shitty place. In this case, Afghanistan. So 10 years later, it's still timely, and that it's in the end that it's people that will implement the change, not technologies. Technologies are tools. Peoples will have to implement it. And finally, Summer Ice, Holly Phillips' story is the only reprint, but it also captured Shine's intent so very much in a subtle, fragile way that a downbeat protagonist finds a new community that helps her settle in that new community and face the future again with some hope. That was the whole idea of Shine. And yeah, the thing was, when I pitched it to the original editor, Christian Dunn, from the original Solaris books, he was really enthusiastic. And he said, Jetse, that's a great idea, that's a great concept. And I hope, I think we can sell 12,000 copies. I was like, 12,000, hallelujah. But then Solaris Books was indeed sold to from Black Library to Rebellion. Rebellion still owns them. And the new editor, well, it was painful, because I was introduced to him. He said, Jetse, I'm John Oliver, I'm your new editor, and I'm Jetse. What do you like, John? Well, Jetse, I like my stories bleak. They can't be bleak enough. I'm like, well, we may have a little difference of viewpoint in here. I was the first book published by the new Solaris, who still had to get some experience in the science fiction part. And they only, well, what is only, they only printed 4,200 instead of the 12,000 I was promised, which was a bit, but what can you do? And in the end, we sold close to 3,500. So I don't think it did bad. I think it did pretty well. Mm-hmm. I just like to imagine what happened if we had printed 12,000. I would have probably sold more of 10,000 of them, which was a bit of a missed opportunity. So there I was. The thing was that I have to say, by the time that's another thing I need to say, if you do publish anthologies, is that getting the stories is half the work. Once it's published, you need to really promote the thing. And I promoted Shine like crazy. Of my 4 years that I worked with Interzone, I knew a lot of people in the business. So I went to cons in the US and in the UK, and I really approached everybody that I knew, getting as many reviews as I could, pushing it everywhere. I was even told that I was hyping the thing. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. So that was the problem. The new Solaris didn't do, because I was their first book. I was their first guinea pig. So about 99% of all the promotion from Shine came from me. I did get, of course, in advance paid. I paid all the authors, and then the money, the money that was left over, I all spent it on promoting Shine. Because I still have the day job. Writing doesn't pay my bills. So I did promote it very much. The only thing Solaris did was publish a page-wide ad on the back of their magazine AD 2000. It was a bit, yeah, it was disappointing.
Yeah, it sounds like you
Hmm?
personally have a lot invested in Shine, and you
Yes, oh
said
yes.
some really wonderful things about it. I mean, this notion that, we as, if you want to call it solar punk, if you want to call it optimistic science fiction, that brand of writing, that group, the fact that we want to reach a wider audience is really, and the fact that you have taken the initiative to solicit writing from authors all over around the world is really important in this current time in the current market. So yeah, that's really fascinating, and thank you for talking so in depth about Shine. But we don't want to spend our whole time together talking about your past work. The first book in your new Forever Curious series came out just a few months ago. Could you tell us a little about the book and the larger series that it kicks off?
Well, actually, Forever Curious is a bit of a thing that's in between. It's 60,000 words. So is this a novella or is this a novel?
Hmm.
And it's part of a two-parter. So the whole thing is 120K words, but it's only two parts. But it cuts beautifully in the middle. But it's basically a space adventure where a kick-ass heroine goes into a very mysterious object, tries to find out its secrets. The thing is, it's a lovely book, but I think I'm sorry to go a little bit to the next one, that for your magazine, my next project is much more interesting because I'm about to release another duology or a diptych or however you call it, also a novel in two pieces that
Mhm.
is set in the near future. And the original title was The Replicant, The Mole and the Imposter. But when I finished the novel about a year ago, it had expanded to 220,000 words, which is big. And I tried to approach agents and publishers, but most of them, well, everybody was really, really nice and friendly. They friendly declined, and only one was quite honest. Said, yeah, for beginning writers, your first novel in sci-fi should be 120, maybe 150,000 words max. Yours is way too long. Bang. I'm like, oh well, but it's the length that it is. So I cut it in two as well. And I'm releasing the first one in December. And I'm calling it The Replicant in the Refugee Camp. I will try to explain why it is more interesting for you, because this is set in a near future where we have a new reality show, a reality event, where one of the 10 candidates is what we call a replicant. It's not a human, but is a human, but the actual brains are artificial. So it's a artificial intelligence disguised as a human. And the idea of this reality show is that the viewers and a team of specialists have to try to figure out which of the 10 is indeed the replicant. And that is where it begins. Because to try to figure out, like, hey, can artificial intelligences really mimic human emotions, etc., etc. That's a starting off point. But to make it more interesting, I said, yeah, what these if it's like Temptation Island or other kind of reality shows, it's like they're all in a little bubble of themselves, which is a bit claustrophobic and boring. I thought, like, no, we're not going to do this one different. We're going to make these 10 people do tasks in a refugee camp on a Greek island, because, well, both in the US and in Europe, the refugee crisis is also a big thing. Of course, the refugee crisis is a consequence of both climate change and wars across the world. But it's one of those things where you get that focus. So these 10 candidates have then to perform tasks in that unnamed refugee camp. I'm not naming an actual camp. It's the idea of a refugee camp on a Greek island. And they are then slowly trying to improve the lot of the people on that island. But here is the funny thing, because this show is such a success and everybody wants it, they start their own Kickstarter to help these people, and things get out of hand. They get so much tech and other influences in there, is that the refugees slowly overcome their traumas and really start to set up their own community, which is actually a step ahead in the future. It's like a little singularity in a refugee camp. It's really, and which can function as a blueprint for a better world. It's like the world in miniature, and it shows things that might or may not help. That may point to directions, to things that can improve the world. That is the novel. Actually, I finished. I hired a proof editor. I got cover images actually from an artist, Manaf Alatar, who is a Syrian refugee who now works in Berlin in Germany. So I got actually a cover from a refugee. I'm really happy with that. And it's fully in the solarpunk genre, because it does show ways forward. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden we go in utopia. It only puts forward the first couple of steps towards a better world, if you get my drift.
Right. Wow, the replicant, that sounds absolutely fascinating, and we'll all have to be keeping our eyes out for that. I can't wait.
That is for your magazine. I'm not saying that Forever Curious is a bad novel, but it's the thing is, I was trying to. I've pitched the replicant to more than 100 agents, and the thing is, if you pitch a novel to the open submission boxes of agents, in about 40-50% of all those, you don't even get an answer. They will only answer if they're interested. And of those answers I only got a few partials, and it's not like the problem is, it's set so near in the future that if I go the whole road, like first get an agent, and then the agent needs to get a publisher, and then gets published, that parts of my novel, that is the problem, parts of my novel will then already be obsolete. That is the big problem with writing near future. Things are obsolete. For example, I let the refugees use cryptocurrency. And everybody's like, why would refugees use cryptocurrency? Well, not just cryptocurrency, but also the other things that things like Ethereum can provide, meaning they can put their ID papers and their money in the cloud, meaning they can't be robbed while they're on the run. That I see as a definite killer application for refugees. Well, then to my surprise, I started doing research. They have already been doing that since 2018. I'm like, what? Refugees are already using cryptocurrency, are already using places in the cloud where they not only put their passports and other ID papers, but also their papers which show how they own a house or how they own, for example, stocks, things like that. They put that in the cloud. So I'm already like, wow, I'm already behind. If I wait 5 more years, I'm writing history. Yeah, I exaggerate a little bit, but that was the problem. So I thought, like, I'm going to try this, to pitch this for a limited amount of time. I tried, and I draw a line in the sand that said, that was 100. If I don't get an offer after I tried 100 agents, I'm like, okay, I'm going to self-publish. So that's what I'm doing now, and this is purely a time thing, because that's the risk of writing near future. You might become obsolete before you finish the novel.
Yes, all excellent points. Yeah, very interesting. And we also appreciate you, reaching out to actual refugees and basically consulting them, for their experiences is really, really wonderful. We have time for maybe one more question. So you've been around the solar punk scene since the beginning. Have you seen any noticeable or significant changes in the subgenre or its various expressions and manifestations over the years?
Yeah. I think basically that solar punk is now finally finding its voice. I think is that there have been only a few optimistic SF anthologies over the years. The only ones that come immediately to mind are Catherine Kramer's Hieroglyph. I hope I pronounced that right. And an anthology of third Flatiron called God Wear Eclipse Glasses. But I think it's really gaining momentum right now. I made a little list, not just the recent Class and Garden solarpunk anthologies. I think they had two called Solarpunk Summers and Solarpunk Winters. There's also an anthology called Fix the World that's just been released, and they are open to a second one focused on climate change. There is the Imagine 2200 competition from Grist, which is, I think, they will announce winners later on this year. There is an anthology from Calix Press from Australia called And Lately the Sun, recently revealed. 3 days ago, I got in my mailbox my Kickstarter copy of The World's Revolution, a climate crisis anthology, which should be out soonish. There is a magazine called Dreamforge Anvil that say that they, and I subscribe to them, that try to publish mostly upbeat stories. And then there is your Solarpunk anthology and your Solarpunk magazine. And I checked your Kickstarter, and holy shit, you destroyed your goal. It's fantastic. So I think there is a real momentum going on right now. I really do. And what I also think is that the best thing to keep this momentum going, I hope, is a magazine. And who cares? Who knows? Maybe it's your Solarpunk magazine that keeps this going. And I actually even stumbled on a thing called Consolation Songs, Optimistic Stories for a Time of Pandemic, a charity anthology. So that is, if I count very quickly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 magazines or anthologies in the past 2 years, basically doing upbeat science fiction. I think, well, that something must be in the water. I hope this is the beginning of a very good thing. I really do not like the punk suffix. It's called solar punk, but punk. I'm a relatively old man. Punk was from the 70s. Punk is 40 years old, and I'm like, yeah, this is a bit old. Yeah, I know that with cyberpunk back in the 80s, science fiction wanted to sound edgy again, and they invented the word cyberpunk. But the thing is, then they called everything punk. Steampunk, steam jazz would have been more appropriate. Diesel punk, nuclear punk, whatever punk. I think punk is old. Not only that, what recently really happened, you can search it on the internet, is that Johnny Lydon, who used to be Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols, he lost a case against the other surviving members of the Sex Pistols because he fought to keep their songs out of a Disney biopic called Pistols. You see which part they cut. So punk is 40 years old and it's becoming a Disney biopic. Oh, come on, people. Disney biopic, that means that punk at this time is about as dangerous as a litter of kittens. So I would recommend, I know you already call it Solarpunk magazine. Well, I would be happy with a rename that takes out the punk suffix. But that's just my rant. Thank you for listening.
No, thank you for sharing that. That's an excellent perspective. It's kind of like, the overuse of a term kind of drains it of its meaning over time. That's why we have to keep having new ideas and new terms and new vernacular. Definitely something to keep in mind. So unfortunately we are all out of time for this episode, but I want to thank you again, Jetse, for coming onto Solarpunk Futures to talk about your really wonderful writing and your wonderful experiences creating Shine and all that good stuff. So thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Yeah, Brianna, thank you very much for having me. All you guys, best of luck with Solarpunk magazine. I just found out that I should actually also pitch something in the Kickstarter, even though you're already there. But we'll do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.